Hello and welcome to our devotion for August 7th as we read through the Bible in a year. And the Old Testament reading for the 7th of August is from Ezra chapter 4 verse 24 through chapter 6 verse 22, which I'll summarize this and also the portion of yesterday's reading that leads up to this after the part we talked about. So after the rebuilding of the temple had begun, the enemies of Judah and Benjamin wanted to, quote, help. Of course, that would have been a bad idea. So when Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the other leaders turned them down, their enemies showed their true colors and tried to sabotage the efforts to rebuild the temple. And they eventually wrote a letter to Artaxerxes, the king of Persia, saying that the city was being rebuilt and that the people were rebellious and would not pay tribute. So Artaxerxes commanded that the work cease. After that, the prophets Haggai and Zechariah prophesied, and Zerubbabel and Jeshua, in conjunction with their prophecy, began rebuilding the temple. The governor had some questions for them, of course. His name was Tatenai. And he reported that the Jews said that they had permission from Cyrus to rebuild the temple that had been built by a great king of Israel. But that temple had been destroyed because they had angered God, and he gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. Then Darius, at this time the king of the Persians, made a decree to search for Cyrus's edict, and at last they found it. So Darius ordered that Tatenai leave the Jews alone and let them rebuild the temple, and that the cost be paid from the royal revenue, and that whatever was needed would be given to the Jews to rebuild the temple. He also warned, interestingly enough, that if anyone altered his edict, a beam would be pulled from his house and he would be impaled on the beam and his house would be made a dunghill. So Darius wasn't messing around. So the temple was finished and the people of Israel celebrated. They offered 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and 12 male goats as a sin offering for all Israel. A much more humble occasion than the dedication under Solomon, but a joyful occasion nonetheless. Then they set the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their divisions for the service of God at Jerusalem in obedience to the Torah. The Passover was also celebrated. So, as today's reading starts out, we're at that point where the work on the temple was ceasing. However, it's not just the temple we're talking about, it's the whole city of Jerusalem. The Old Testament expresses the theology that God dwells in Zion and not just the temple. Likewise, we see in the New Testament that God's people do not simply come to worship at the Jerusalem temple. Rather, baptized believers in Christ come to dwell with him in the heavenly Zion and the Jerusalem from above. In fact, in the New Jerusalem, there is no temple besides God and the Lamb dwelling in the midst of the city. This is what it states of the heavenly Jerusalem in the book of Revelation. It is also meaningful that the resumption of the work on the temple is credited to the preaching of Haggai and Zechariah. Here we have priests and prophets working together along with the governor. This might be a foreshadowing, in fact, of the threefold office of Jesus Christ, our prophet, priest, and king. Then when the scroll is discovered and Darius issues his decree, he asks the Israelites to make sacrifices on behalf of the Persian kings and officials. The people of Israel didn't object to this request. In a similar way, Paul urges Christians to pray for those in authority. This was also commanded in the Old Testament. Martin Luther, when it comes to the Catechism, also saw such prayers as fitting in with the fourth petition to the Lord's Prayer. Luther wrote, "Indeed, the greatest need of all is to pray for our civil authorities in the government, for chiefly through them does God provide us our daily bread and all the comforts of this life. Although we have received from God all good things in abundance, we cannot retain any of them or enjoy them in security and happiness unless he gives us a stable, peaceful government. For where dissension, strife, and war prevail, there our daily bread is taken away, or at least reduced. Thus, Luther urges, ask God to endow the emperor, kings, and all estates of men, and especially our princes, counselors, magistrates, and officials, with wisdom, strength, and prosperity to govern well, to grant their subjects and the people at large to live together in obedience, peace, and concord. Well, there you have it. May God be with you and bless you, and I'll look forward to